So break-even diagrams can be the absolute nemesis of many A-level business students. So in this video, we're going to try and show you what kind of information is displayed in a break-even diagram and how you interpret that information. We'll start by checking out the axes. And along the x-axis on a break-even diagram, it will display the business's different possible levels of output, from producing 0 products per week or per month, all the way to producing up to the business's maximum capacity. And on this diagram, that is 5,000 units over a period of time. And then we'll demark some different variants along the x-axis there to say, well, we might produce no units at all, or it could be 1,000, 2, 3, 4,000, even 5,000 units. Up the y-axis, it displays to us what the organisation's costs might be if we do produce different levels of output. So we can see what our costs might be if we don't produce any units at all, what our costs might be if we produce 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 units. And also the y-axis allows us to see what the business's sales revenue might be at different levels of output as well. So we can use these diagrams to see what will be our sales revenue if we produce no units at all the way up to what our sales revenue will be if we reach our maximum capacity and sell 5,000 units. Now, once we've looked at the axes, we can see some of the different lines that we've got drawn on our diagram. And these lines are crucial for allowing us to show key bits of information on a break-even chart. So our first line is this blue one across here. We've labelled it up FC, and FC stands for fixed costs. And you'll see that this line is horizontal. And it's horizontal because no matter what our level of output is for this organisation, there are always some costs that have to be paid. Our fixed costs are ones that remain constant, remain unchanged in the short term, regardless of the fact that we might increase the number of units that we produce. So on this diagram, our fixed costs come in at £10,000. That's going to be made up of things like rent and insurance and salaries. And that means that it doesn't matter whether we produce 0 products in a month or 5,000 products in a month. Our fixed costs are always going to come in at £10,000. Now, because we've got to pay those fixed costs regardless, even if we don't produce any products, the next line we can show starts at our fixed cost line. And that's labelled up as TC, which stands for total costs. So this is where we take our fixed costs and then we also add on the fact that every time we produce a level of output, we're going to have to pay some variable costs of production. Now, if we don't produce any products at all, we won't have to pay any variable costs, things like raw materials or transport costs or wages. But the more we increase our level of output, the more variable costs we're going to have to pay, the more we're going to have to pay for stock and raw materials and wages and transportation. So as we produce a greater level of output, our variable costs, and so therefore our total costs, will go up. So our total costs at 5,000 units are much higher than our total costs at 1,000 units. But the key thing to remember is, even if we produce 0 units in a month, doesn't mean our total costs are 0. Although our variable costs of production will be nothing if we don't produce any products, we're still always going to have to pay those fixed costs. Got to pay the rent, got to pay the insurance, got to pay those salaries. So we will start from the fixed cost line and it will go diagonally upwards. Final line we have on our break-even diagrams is labelled up as SR, which stands for sales revenue. That shows us at different levels of output how much revenue the business may be able to achieve. So this time it does start in the far bottom left-hand corner at the point of origin there. And what that means is if we produce no products at all, we've got nothing to sell. So we won't make any sales revenue. And it doesn't matter how much we charge for our products. We could charge £1 million for a product if we wish. If we don't produce any, and then we don't sell any, our sales revenue will be 0. But this line also raises diagonally, which indicates the more units of output we produce, the more products we will have to sell, and so theoretically, the more sales revenue we may be able to realise. So our sales revenue at 5,000 units is much, much higher than our sales revenue will be at 1,000 units. And we can calculate that sales revenue by just taking different levels of output and multiplying it by our selling price. So we would do 1,000 units times our selling price. It will tell us our sales revenue. We do 3,000 units multiplied by our selling price, and it will tell us our sales revenue. So that shows us the three different lines we'll see on a break-even diagram. But here's the good bit. Here's what we can actually read or interpret from our diagrams. So we know that breaking even means that a business hasn't made a profit. It's not sold enough products to make a profit, but it's not sold so few that it makes a loss. It has sold just enough to cover its costs. So on this diagram, we're breaking even where we have sold just enough products and achieved just enough sales revenue to equal or cover our total cost of production. So where these two lines intersect, where they cross over, where our sales revenue and our total cost line are at the same point where they intersect, that shows us on our diagram what our break-even point is. But what's more interesting is where we then read down onto the x-axis and see how many units that equals. So what's known as our break-even level of output. So on this diagram, our two lines cross over, our sales revenue, our total cost line intersect at this point here. And that is directly above 2,000 units. What that indicates to the entrepreneur or to the managers of this organisation is that if we can hit 2,000 units of production and we can sell all of those 2,000 units, we will have made just enough sales revenue to cover our total costs. Now, we could work that out by just using the break-even formula, but our break-even diagrams can show us a couple of other tasty bits of information as well. First of all, our break-even diagrams can also illustrate what's known as our margin of safety as well. And your margin of safety is how many products you are actually selling above your break-even level of output. So we might construct this diagram at the start of a month, before, maybe even before the entrepreneur has set the business up, to establish what our break-even level of output would be, and we can use it as a target to try and aim towards. And in our first few months, we know that if we can hit sales of 2,000 units, we would break even. But it might be that further down the line, we're selling more than that. We're producing on a greater scale than that. Maybe we're producing 3,000 units per month. Now, if we produce 3,000 units per month, that is above our break-even level of output. In fact, it is 1,000 units above our break-even level of output. And that is what's known as our margin of safety. Margin of safety means how much your sales could fall by and you would still be at your break-even level of output. So if we're producing 3,000 units per month, then assuming we're selling all those units, we could reduce our level of output by 1,000 units and we'd still be no worse off than falling back to our break-even level of output. So the difference between those 2 points there is known as our margin of safety. Now, if of course we were actually producing at 4,000 units per month, our margin of safety would be even greater. This time it'd be 2,000. If we were working at full capacity and producing 5,000 units per month, then assuming that our break-even level of output remained unchanged at 2,000 units, we'd have an even greater margin of safety there. So you can see margin of safeties on break-even diagrams. Could even be asked to mark them on there on the diagram. So it allows us to interpret, to read these diagrams to find out additional information. The other thing we can see from our break-even diagrams is the level of profit or loss that we might achieve at different levels of output. Now, to do that, what we need to do is to read the difference between our sales revenue line at a certain level of output and our total cost line at the same level of output. So for example, anything to the right of our break-even point will show us how much profit a business might make at a given level of output. For example, at 3,000 units here, the difference between our sales revenue here and our total cost here is how much profit we would realise. And if we read across onto the y-axis and had a look at what the figures might be for sales revenue at 3,000 units and what it might be for total cost at 3,000 units, it allows us just to see how much profit the business might achieve if it could get to that level of output. We can do exactly the same for loss as well. Everything to the left of our break-even point here would be a loss if a business were to sell that number of units. For example, at 1,000 units here, we haven't reached our break-even level of output yet, and we can calculate how much of a loss we would actually make. So we'd have to read across to the y-axis again. We'd have a look at our sales revenue at 1,000 units and read across, and we'd have a look at our total costs at 1,000 units and we'd read across, and the difference between those two figures would tell us exactly in pounds how much of a loss we would accomplish. So there's break-even charts for you. You can read a lot of information from them. You can tell the margin of safety that an organisation might achieve. You can read profit, you can read loss, you can see the break-even level of output on there. It's a really common concept to come up in business A-level examinations. One you really should make sure that you've mastered. Good luck with it. If you've got any questions about it, throw it into the comments down below. If this tutorial is useful, give it a like, share it with your classmates. Best of luck with your revision. I know the exams are coming soon. You know you can crack them. Just keep revising those key concepts. We'll see you for another tutorial soon.